Imagine a quiet chapel, the kind where every creak of the wooden pews echoes like a whisper from the past. The air's thick with that faint smell of polished oak and wilting lilies, the kind that clings to your throat and makes you swallow hard. This isn't just any funeral. It's a soldier's goodbye, heavy with sacrifice and honor. The sort of day that feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. They say dogs don't feel grief, that they don't understand loss like we do. But what happened here? Oh, it'd make even the toughest skeptic pause and wonder. Now picture this, a German shepherd named Orion, all sleek black and tan fur and sharp, soulful eyes, sitting stiff as a statue beside a dark oak casket. His partner, Sergeant Elijah Calloway, lies there, a hero who gave everything in the haze of war. The room's buzzing with quiet sobs, but Orion, he's still, like he's guarding a secret only he can feel. And trust me, what he does next is gonna tug at your heartstrings in ways you didn't see coming. This isn't just a story about a military dog. It's about loyalty so deep it cuts through the silence of grief. It's about a bond that doesn't end, even when the flag's folded and the last note of taps fades away. You ever had a pet that seemed to get you, really get you when no one else did? That's what we're talking here, except this time, it's playing out in front of a whole crowd, raw and real. Elijah's sister Margaret is there, her hands trembling as she clutches a tissue, watching Orion like he's the last piece of her brother she's got left. The soldiers around her, all squared shoulders and teary eyes, they feel it too, this unspoken thing hanging in the air. It's a day of farewell, sure, but it's more than that. It's a moment that asks, what's devotion look like when the world's falling apart? So, settle in. Let's walk through this together. It starts with a funeral, a soldier's casket, and a dog who's about to show everyone what love really means. Ready for what's coming? You won't believe how it unfolds. The chapel felt like a painting frozen in time, all muted golds and shadows dancing through the stained glass windows. Sergeant Elijah Calloway's funeral had drawn a crowd, soldiers in crisp uniforms, family hunched in pews, and that sharp tang of incense curling up toward the rafters. His dark oak casket sat front and center, a folded flag draped over it, edges crisp as a salute, glowing under the soft light like it carried his sacrifice in every thread. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, broken only by the occasional sniffle or the rustle of someone shifting in their seat. You could almost taste the grief, bitter and cold, settling over everyone like a fog. Elijah had been a brother, a hero, a soldier who'd faced the chaos of war with a steady hand and a quick laugh. Now, here he was, still as stone, and the weight of that hit hard. Margaret, his sister, sat in the front row, her dark hair pulled back tight, eyes red but steady. She was trying to hold it together for him, you could tell. The chaplain's voice droned soft and low, words about honor and rest, but it barely cut through the thick air. Everyone was waiting, though they didn't know it yet, for something to break the spell. Outside, the wind howled low, rattling the old windows like it wanted in on the morning. Inside, the glow of those stained glass saints seemed to flicker, casting little rainbows across the casket, red, blue, gold. Like a quiet promise Elijah wasn't alone. But the real heartbeat of the room? That was Orion, the German shepherd, sitting rigid by the casket's side. His ears twitched at every sound, but his gaze never left that flag, like he was keeping watch over his partner one last time. What was he thinking, you wonder? The soldiers in the back, all squared jaws and medals pinned tight, kept stealing glances at him. They'd seen Orion and Elijah together, through training, through deployments, through the dust and noise of battle. That dog wasn't just a military dog, he was Elijah's shadow, his brother in arms. And now, with the casket so still and the flag so final, you could feel the question hanging there. How do you say goodbye to a bond like that? It's the kind of thing that makes you think about your own losses, doesn't it? Then just as the chaplain paused, a single sob broke loose, sharp, jagged like a crack in the ice. Margaret's shoulders shook and a few heads turned, but Orion didn't flinch. He just sat there, steady as ever, like he knew something the rest didn't. And maybe he did, because what he was about to do. That's where this story takes a turn you'll never forget. The chapel was still humming with that thick, mournful quiet when it happened. Orion snapped to life. 1 second he was a statue beside the casket, all muscle and fur carved from shadow. The next, his leash slipped from a soldier's grip like it was nothing but a whisper. His paws thudded against the polished floor, a quick, frantic rhythm that bounced off the walls, and before anyone could blink, he was airborne. Up he went, a streak of black and tan, landing soft as a prayer on Elijah's chest right atop that folded flag. The room gasped, a collective inhale that tasted like shock and damp wool from all those dress uniforms. Orion didn't care about the stares or the murmurs rippling through the pews. He buried his nose into the flag, snuffling deep, like he was chasing the last trace of Elijah's scent. Maybe that mix of sweat, gun oil, and the peppermint gum his partner always chewed. His whimpers came low and jagged, little cracks in the silence that hit you right in the gut. You ever seen a dog cry? Not with tears, but with that sound. Raw, lost, like he was asking the universe why. It was the kind of noise that made your own throat tighten, whether you wanted it to or not. Margaret's hands flew to her mouth, her tissue crumpling as she watched, wide-eyed. The soldiers froze, some half-standing, unsure whether to grab him or let him be. After all, this was no ordinary German shepherd. This was Elijah's military dog, his partner through every hellish firefight. Orion curled tighter, his big frame, somehow small against the casket, paws tucked under like he could hold Elijah there forever. It was loyalty in motion, a bond so fierce it didn't need words. Just that leap, that landing, that heartbreaking whine. The stained glass light shifted then, spilling a warm amber glow across Orion's fur, like the sun itself wanted to wrap up. A kid in the back whispered, "He's not supposed to do that." And a few nervous chuckles broke out, soft, affectionate, the kind you let slip when you're too sad to hold it in. But nobody moved to stop him. Who could? This wasn't just a dog losing it, this was grief wearing fur, playing out for everyone to see. And oh, it made you wonder, what would you do for someone you'd never let go? The chaplain raised a hand, his voice steady but gentle. Give him his moment. And that's when Orion lifted his head, just a fraction, ears perked like he'd heard something. Maybe Elijah's laugh on the wind, maybe nothing at all. Whatever it was, it set the stage for what came next. Something that'd leave every soul in that room holding their breath. The chapel hung in a stunned hush after Orion's leap, the air buzzing with something you couldn't quite name. Maybe awe, maybe sorrow, maybe both. Margaret's hands dropped from her face, her breath catching as she stared at that German shepherd curled atop her brother's casket. His whimpers had faded into a soft, steady panting, warm puffs of life against the cold stillness of the flag. She reached out, fingertips trembling, but pulled back, her eyes locked on Orion's. And it was like they shared a secret language of loss. You know that feeling when a look says more than words ever could? The soldiers around her weren't much better off. Big guys, tough as nails from years of war, now blinking fast, wiping at their faces with sleeves when they thought no one saw. One of them, Davis, who'd hauled Elijah out of a firefight once, muttered, "Damn dog's breaking my heart." And the guy next to him just nodded, jaw tight. Orion's grief wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet, heavy, the kind that seeps into your bones. The room smelled faintly of gunpowder off their uniforms, a sharp reminder of the life Elijah and Orion had lived together and lost. Then someone moved, a young private, all awkward elbows, stepping forward like he'd drag Orion down. But Orion's head snapped up and out came a low, rumbling growl, deep as a storm rolling in. It wasn't mean, mind you, just protective, like he was saying, "This is my post, my partner, my goodbye." The private froze, hands up, and the tension spiked, a prickly heat crawling over everyone's skin. Who hasn't felt that urge to guard what's left of someone they love, even when it's irrational? The chaplain stepped in then, his robes swishing soft against the floor, voice calm as a lullaby. "Let him be," he said, eyes crinkling with a kindness that felt ancient. "His grief's as real as ours, maybe more." And wasn't that the truth? Orion settled back, resting, his muzzle on the flag, but his ears stayed up, twitching at every creak, every sigh. It was like he was holding the whole room together, or maybe tearing it apart, showing them all what devotion looks like when it's got nowhere left to go. Margaret let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half wonder, and whispered, "Elijah'd love this. He always said Orion was the real hero." That got a few smiles, soft and fleeting, like sunlight breaking through clouds. But those smiles faded fast, because Orion's next move, those sharp eyes darting to empty air, made the hair on everyone's neck stand up. What was he seeing that they couldn't? The chapel's air seemed to thicken right then, like it was holding on to something nobody could pin down. Orion's growl had faded, but now his ears flicked forward, sharp and alert, tracking something across the room, something nobody else could see. His eyes, those deep amber pools, locked onto empty space near the casket, pupils wide, and his tail gave a single, slow twitch. The faint hum of a fly buzzing against a window pane cut through the quiet, a tiny nagging sound that made everyone's skin prickle. Ever get that feeling something's watching you, even when you're alone? Margaret tilted her head, following Orion's gaze, her breath hitching as she squinted at, well, nothing. Just a patch of dusty air where the light bent funny, shimmering like heat off a desert road. "What's he looking at?" she whispered, half to herself, half to the soldier beside her, who just shrugged, uneasy. The room's mood shifted, less mournful, more restless, like the universe had slipped a gear. You could hear boots scuffing on the floor, a nervous shuffle, as folks started wondering if dogs really do see beyond like the old stories say. Orion stood then, slow and deliberate, his paws pressing into the flag with a soft rustle that sounded louder than it should have. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just stared, head cocked like he was listening to a voice carried on a breeze nobody else felt. The soldiers swapped glances and one muttered, "My grandma swore her mutt saw ghosts. Maybe she wasn't nuts." That got a shaky chuckle or two, but it died fast when Orion's hackles rose, a ripple down his spine you could feel in your own back. Spooky? Sure, but kinda beautiful too, wasn't it? The chaplain clasped his hands, his silver cross glinting, as he watched Orion with a look that said he'd seen stranger things. "They say animals sense what we can't," he offered, voice low like he was testing the waters. Margaret hugged herself, her nails digging into her arms, and nodded, like maybe Elijah's spirit was lingering, saying one last goodbye through his partner. The idea hung there, fragile but real, and it made you think, what if love leaves echoes we're too blind to catch? Then Orion's stance softened, just a touch, his head dipping as if whatever he'd tracked had moved on, or stayed. The fly stopped buzzing, leaving a silence so deep it pressed against your ears. Everyone held their breath, waiting, because whatever was happening here, it wasn't over. Not yet. The chapel's strange hush stretched thin, like a thread about to snap, until the chaplain broke it with a voice soft as worn leather. "At ease, soldier," he said, looking right at Orion. And you'd swear that German Shepherd understood every word. His hackles smoothed down, slow as a sigh, and his big frame seemed to melt a little, tension leaking out like water from a cracked cup. The air lightened too, carrying a faint whiff of candle wax that flickered in the sconces, warm, steady, like a quiet nod from somewhere beyond. Ever notice how a single phrase can shift everything? Orion's amber eyes flicked back to that empty spot one last time, then dropped to the casket, where the flag lay rumpled from his paws. He nosed it gently, not frantic like before, but careful, deliberate, like he was tucking Elijah in for the long haul. Margaret let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, her shoulders slumping as she watched. "He's letting go," she murmured, and the soldier next to her, Davis again, grunted. "Yeah, but he's still got his post." Loyalty doesn't just vanish, does it? It adapts. The room seemed to exhale with them. A few soldiers straightened, up, hands unclenching while others dabbed at their eyes with knuckles trying to look tough about it. Orion slid down then, graceful as a shadow, and stretched out beside the casket, his muzzle resting right where Elijah's hands would have been. The wood creaked under his weight, a low groan that mingled with the distant chirp of a sparrow. Outside, life going on, even here. It was a goodbye, sure, but one wrapped in honor, the kind that sticks with you. The chaplain nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, like he'd just witnessed something sacred. "That's a soldier's farewell," he said, and Margaret chuckled, soft and watery. "Elijah'd say Orion outranks us all." That got a ripple of grins, light, affectionate, the kind that sneaks up when you need it most. But Orion, he didn't budge, just lay there steady as a rock, showing them all what it means to stand by your partner, even when the fight's over. Makes you wonder who's really teaching who, huh? Then he did it. One last move that'd seal this moment forever. Orion lifted his head, slow and sure, and pressed it against the casket, holding there like he was etching Elijah into his bones. The sparrow chirped again, sharper now, and the room braced itself for what came next. The final steps of a hero's send-off. The chapel doors creaked open then, letting in a gust of cool April air that rustled the hymnals stacked on a side table. It was time, the final salute for Sergeant Elijah Calloway, and the soldiers snapped to attention, boots thudding in unison like a heartbeat against the floor. Two of them stepped forward, hands steady as they lifted the flag off the casket, folding it with crisp, practiced snaps, corner to corner, a triangle of stars and stripes. The fabric whispered as it tightened, a sound like pages turning on, a story closing. Ever feel a moment so big it steals your breath? Orion didn't move from his spot beside the casket, but his ears perked at the rustle, eyes tracking every fold like he was part of the ritual. Outside, a rifle cracked. Once, twice, 3 times. A gun salute splitting the air, sharp and final, the echo bouncing off the stone walls. Margaret flinched at each shot, her hands twisting together, but she kept her gaze on that flag, now, a neat bundle in Davis's arms. He walked it over, slow and solemn, and pressed it into her hands, warm from his grip, heavy with sacrifice. You could see it in her face. This was Elijah, or what was left of him. Then came taps, those haunting, lonesome notes drifting in from a bugler just beyond the doors. The melody curled around the room, slow and golden, like honey spilling over. Jagged edges, and it hit you right where it hurts. The soldiers stood rigid, saluting, their shadows stretching long across the pews in the fading light. Orion stayed put, unflinching, his black and tan coat gleaming under a stray beam, like he was a guard to the end, a military dog honoring his partner in his own quiet way. Who doesn't choke up at that kind of devotion? Davis cleared his throat, a rough little sound, and muttered, he'd hate all this fuss, probably laughing at us right now. That got a few nods, a couple of damp smiles, Elijah's quick grin flashing in their minds, no doubt. But Orion, he just rested there, paws crossed, steady as the oak beneath him, like he knew this was no joke. This was honor, pure and simple. The bugle's last note hung, trembling, then faded, and you couldn't help but feel the weight of it all settle in. Margaret clutched the flag tighter, her knuckles white, and glanced at Orion, like she was waiting for him to signal it was really over. He didn't, not yet, just stayed there, a loyal sentinel as the room held its breath for what he'd do next. One final mark of a bond that wouldn't quit. The chapel doors swung shut with a soft thud, sealing the cool air inside as the last echoes of taps dissolved into dusk. The crowd began to stir, soldiers loosening their collars, family gathering coats. But Orion stayed put beside the casket, his shadow pooling long and dark across the floor. Then, slow as dawn breaking, he lifted a paw, resting it on the oak like he was reaching for Elijah one more time. The wood gleamed under a fading sunbeam, polished smooth, and the faint scent of earth drifted in from somewhere, raw, alive like a promise of what's next. Ever think some goodbyes feel more like see you later? Margaret knelt beside him, the folded flag still cradled in her arms, and ran a hand along his fur, Coarse, warm, a little dusty from the day. "You feel him too, don't you?" she whispered, and Orion's head tilted just a fraction, like he was agreeing in his own quiet way. She glanced back at that empty spot he'd stared at earlier, half expecting to see Elijah's grin flickering there, and a shiver danced up her spine, not cold, but electric. It's funny how a dog can make you believe in things you'd usually brush off, isn't it? The soldiers filed out, boots scuffing soft on the stone steps, their murmurs blending into a low hum. Talk of Elijah's laugh, his bad coffee, his knack for calming Orion in a storm. One paused, a grizzled sergeant with a limp, and tossed a salute Orion's way. "Good boy," he rasped, voice catching, and you could tell he meant it for both of them. Soldier and partner, bound beyond the war. That kind of loyalty, it lingers. Heavy and sweet like wood smoke you can't shake off your clothes. Orion stood then, stretching slow, his joints popping like twigs snapping in a fire. He padded toward the doors, pausing to glance back, not at the casket, but at that same invisible space, his tail giving a single deliberate wag. Margaret followed, flag in hand, and stepped into the sunset. A blaze of orange and pink smearing the sky, warm as a hug she hadn't felt in years. She swore she caught a whiff of peppermint gum on the breeze and it hit her. Some bonds don't break. They stretch, they shimmer, they hold. The mourners watched Orion go, a silhouette against the glow, and a few wiped their eyes, smiling through, like they'd seen something bigger than loss. He stopped once more, lifting his nose to the air, and you couldn't help but wonder, was Elijah there, in the wind, in the light, in that unshaken devotion? Maybe love's like that, eternal, quiet, waiting for you to notice. The sunset flared brighter as Orion stepped fully into it, his black and tan coat catching the light like embers glowing in a dying fire. He padded across the chapel lawn, grass crunching under his paws, a faint dew already settling in and leaving, a cool, wet kiss on the air. Margaret trailed behind, the flag still hugged tight to her chest, her boots sinking soft into the earth with every step. Then Orion stopped, sharp, sudden, lifting his nose again, sniffing at something nobody else could catch. Ever wonder what a dog knows that we don't? He turned his head, just a bit, and stared back toward the chapel doors. Those big amber, eyes glinting like he was locking onto Elijah one last time. The breeze kicked up, rustling the leaves overhead with a sound like hushed applause, and Margaret froze too, her breath fogging in the evening chill. She swore she felt it, a warmth brushing her cheek light as a feather, like her brother's hand saying, "I'm okay, sis." It's wild how a moment can feel so big and so small all at once, isn't it? Like the universe slipped you a little. Sigrid Orion let out a low huff, not a bark, just a puff of air, steady and sure, like he'd settled something in his soul. Then he sat, right there in the grass, tail brushing the ground in slow, lazy sweeps. The soldiers lingering by their trucks watched, hands stuffed in pockets, one muttering, "That dog's still on duty. Elijah's lucky to have him." Awam, few nodded and you could see it in their faces, grief softening into something warmer, something like awe. Who hasn't had a pet that felt more like family than some folks you know? Margaret sank down beside him, knees damp in the dew, and rested a hand on his back. "You're my hero too," she said, voice cracking just a hair, and Orion leaned into her, a solid, furry weight that said more than words ever could. The sky dimmed, stars pricking through the haze, and that peppermint whiff danced on the wind again, faint but stubborn. It was a goodbye, yeah, but the kind that leaves you believing some ties don't snap. They just stretch across whatever comes next. Orion looked up then, one last time, his gaze drifting past her to the horizon, like he saw Elijah out there, waiting, grinning, ready for their next mission. Margaret smiled, small and real, and felt that warmth settle deep. Some bonds? They're forever, quiet, fierce, and truer than anything. Makes you think about the ones who've changed your life, doesn't it? And there it is, a soldier's funeral, a German shepherd's leap, and a bond that didn't quit, even when the casket closed. Orion showed us something that day, didn't he? Grief's messy, loud, quiet, strange. But devotion? That's a steady flame burning through loss, war, and silence, lighting up what really matters. Margaret felt it, the soldiers saw it, and maybe you did too. That love doesn't just fade. It digs in deep as roots, and sometimes it takes a dog to remind us. So here's the lesson, straight from Orion's paws. The ones who stand by us, who see us when we're invisible, they're the heroes, fur or no fur. Life's full of goodbyes, but the best bonds? They stick around, whispering through the wind, warming the air when you least expect it. Elijah and Orion prove that, and it's the kind of truth that hits you square in the chest. What about you? Ever had an animal that changed your life, taught you loyalty, pulled you through a storm? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Hit that like button if Orion tugged at your heart, and subscribe for more tales that remind us. Sometimes, the greatest teachers have 4 paws.